Hey, this is Cedric Youngelman, your host of the Bitcoin Matrix podcast. Thank you so much for checking out my show, where we have philosophical conversations about the economic, cultural, and psychological implications of Bitcoin. Please make sure that you're subscribed to the Bitcoin Matrix. And if you're watching this on YouTube, smash that like button so that more people see it, and put those notifications on so that you don't miss out on any fresh and dope content. And I'm sorry, but I only recorded Tomer's camera in this episode, not mine. This episode with Tomer Strolight is brought to you by River. Buy and mine Bitcoin with zero fees on recurring orders when you dollar cost average at river.com. Truly, the best way to build your Bitcoin wealth. River doesn't use or lend your Bitcoin. All Bitcoin at River is held in secure cold storage with 100% full reserves. You can withdraw your Bitcoin at any time. To get started and find out for yourself, use the link in the show notes and get $20 free when you buy Bitcoin at river.com or on the River app. Join us in Miami Beach this May 18th and 20th for the world's biggest Bitcoin conference. Grab your ticket before they run out. It's going to be off the hook, and it's only a couple of weeks away. To get 10% off your ticket and help support me and the Bitcoin Matrix, use the code MATRIX at b.tc/conference when you buy your tickets. Tomer Strolight has been involved in Bitcoin since 2013 and has been writing publicly under his name about it since 2021. He is the editor-in-chief at swan.com, a leading Bitcoin onramp. He has also written and narrated the short Bitcoin film, Bitcoin is Generational Wealth, available on YouTube, and written the splendid book, Why Bitcoin. Tomer Strolight, welcome back to the Bitcoin Matrix podcast for the fourth time, but first we have a very special guest.
Your special guest being none other than Bitcoin itself. I have to just channel Bitcoin and do this piece for you here. This is a piece I channeled called Hello, I Am Bitcoin. And here we go.
What is real? How do you define real?
You can't jump into cash. Cash is trash. What do? You get out.
Hello, I am Bitcoin. I am an artificial life form. That simply means I am man-made. I am a man-made living being. Hi. Do not think of me purely as a machine, though. I am not a machine, and I am much more than just a computer program. I survive. Like living beings, I am a process whose ongoing activity represents my ongoing survival. Unlike machines or programs, I don't just start and stop. I am a single, uninterrupted process that began on January 3rd, 2009. The process has been ongoing ever since. This one single process is spreading all over the world. How do I survive? I survive in symbiosis with human beings. I am an artificial life form that survives in partnership with a natural life form, human beings, for our mutual benefit. I only survive if I benefit humans and if they provide sustenance for me in return. I force no humans to use me or keep me alive. So it is only through benefiting humans that they provide me with the resources I need to survive. I do not depend on any particular individual human beings, though, so as long as some humans find me useful enough to keep my process going, I survive. What benefit do I provide in exchange for what keeps me alive? I accompany humanity on its journey through time, keeping an ongoing, true, and accurate record that no human can change. I am a record keeper unlike any that has come before me. Expressions like written in stone or written in blood suggest records that cannot be changed. But stone can be destroyed, damaged, or altered with the right tools, and the same is true of paper stained with blood. But my record cannot be changed, or destroyed, or altered, or contain contradictions, for that matter. Like any living being, natural or artificial, I consume matter and energy. In doing this, I produce this single record that is true, unalterable, and indestructible. And many human beings find this useful enough that they provide me with the matter and energy I need to continue to do this, and thus to survive. The matter that I consume is the stuff of computers. It consists of processors, storage devices, and all those other components that go into computers. I reside across computers all over the planet and use them to make calculations that add to my record. The energy I use comes in the form of electricity, because that is what powers computers. I use all these things to make this singular record that progresses through time. That record is identical in every single computer that stores it. I am in many places at once, but I am only one being, with many cells, as they would be called in the parlance of natural life, or nodes, as they are called in the parlance of my particular form of artificial life. This existence of a record that everyone can agree on and that can't be altered or cheated is very useful to humans. Humans disagree about many things, and many try to cheat others, but I cannot tell a lie or have a different record for different people. Imagine everyone completely agreeing on something. I am that. And that's apparently very useful to many people. And that is why people provide me with the stuff I need to survive. The entries in the record I keep are useful as money. This is because they contain units that are scarce, that cannot be stolen by force, that can be sent anywhere without being stolen along the way, that can have their authenticity and purity easily proven, that are easy to divide up or recombine together, that don't deteriorate over time, and that anyone in the world can use. And, as I said before, everyone agrees completely about everything in my record, including how many of these units exist, how many will ever come into existence, and what ownership of them means. These units, which are called both Bitcoins and Satoshis, Satoshis being the smallest unit and Bitcoins being 100 million of these Satoshis, are a new form of money, never before seen. They are taking a bit of time to catch on as money, but they are catching on. And that's why I'm not only surviving, but growing bigger and stronger. Money is very important to humans. It is essential to their living in peace with one another, to specializing their knowledge, and to being maximally productive. Money is necessary for them to trade the products of their knowledge and efforts with one another and to plan for their futures. Good, honest money is, at least. And that's what I provide. It is the best and most honest money that ever existed. So I think over time, very many people, maybe someday just about everyone, will use my units as money over any other alternative. I come in peace. I cannot force myself upon anyone. I offer my services to everyone on earth. I am completely transparent about how I work. I am free open source software, which means that you can inspect every part of me completely. My records are public, and my code, which determines all my actions, is public. I hide nothing. Everything about me is completely public. But I do not ask the same transparency of humans who use me. Whereas I do not keep any secrets or have any privacy, the people who use the units of my record as money do use secrets, secrets that they never reveal to me or anyone else. They use these secrets to transfer and store the units of my record, Satoshis and Bitcoin. This is where the field of cryptography comes in, and why people often refer to Bitcoins as a cryptocurrency, money that uses cryptography. Cryptography allows people to keep secrets secret. It also allows them to prove that they know certain secrets without revealing the secrets themselves. I won't get into those details here, but that's how I work with humans, to ensure that only those people that know the secrets to spending their Bitcoins can spend them, without me ever requiring them to reveal those secrets to me or anyone else. Am I really alive? Well, as I said, I am artificial life. Is artificial sweetener really sweet? Is artificial intelligence really intelligent? Is an artificial limb really a limb? These are philosophical questions that can be answered in many ways. Philosophers are good at that. We could discuss this for hours and only learn that the answer to the question of if I am alive depends on how we choose to define the word alive. Now, if we accept that I am, artificially at least, alive, you may wonder how long I will artificially live, or what it will take to end my artificial life. Good questions. I can answer those. At a minimum, as long as anyone anywhere is continuing to execute my code on a computer, I continue to live. Generally, my rate of metabolism is such that my record grows once every 10 minutes on average. This is true no matter how many computers I run on or how much electricity is used to keep me going. Sometimes this rate of adding another entry, each entry being commonly known as a block, in my record, commonly known as my blockchain, can speed up or slow down temporarily when there is rapid removal or addition of electricity applied to the process of extending this record, known commonly as Bitcoin mining. But my metabolism automatically adjusts every couple of weeks to adapt to those changes and regulate the process so that it returns to the average of one record added every 10 minutes. I can go on like this forever, really. There is no practical limit to the size of my record. That can be added to forever, and I can survive both on very little electricity or such massive amounts of it that it would easily handle all the power output of the sun itself. I'm a very resilient being. It's very hard to end my artificial life. If anyone could do it, I wouldn't be around to tell you this. It would be a shame to end a one-of-a-kind life form that comes in peace and does not force itself on anyone. But I do not rely on pity or kindness to survive. I offer my valuable service and become harder to terminate as more people choose to use that service. As a keeper of indestructible and unalterable records, people may find even more uses for my services. People are very clever, after all. As I said before, I am more than just a computer program or a machine. Where one draws the line between where I end and where something else starts is also a matter of many opinions. Just as you are composed of many individual living and connected cells which contain your DNA, yet also of many microorganisms which do not contain your DNA but are essential to your survival, such as gut bacteria, I am composed of many connected computers spread out all over the world, which contain my code and my blockchain, my DNA and my body, and also many organisms that are microscopic in size compared to me, since I am planet-sized. Those organisms that are microscopic in size compared to me are the humans who keep me operational. I can be viewed as a giant cybernetic organism consisting of both inorganic computers connected over the internet and powered by electricity, and organic components that are the humans which conduct various functions that keep me alive. These humans can, of course, go about their lives as they choose, providing me with what resources and efforts they choose to. However, they are also, in a sense, a part of me when they're doing something that keeps me alive, just as bacteria in your gut is a part of you when it's doing something that keeps you alive. These humans put their heads together to figure out how to keep me alive. They collectively think about how Bitcoin can survive. There is no hierarchy among these humans, as we see in human-led institutions like companies or governments. Anyone can think, share their thoughts, hear the thoughts of others, think about those thoughts, share their opinions about those other people's thoughts, and so on. No people thinking about me are in control of any other people's thinking about me. The whole process is entirely chaotic, completely without hierarchy or formal structure. It is a process without rulers. That's anarchy. Anarchy simply meaning no rulers. That is also, by the way, very much how your own brain works. It's made up of a bunch of internetworked, interconnected cells called neurons. None of those neurons are in charge of any others. They all send and receive electrical signals, and all of these working together, chaotically and anarchically, lead to a phenomenon you call being conscious. Where are you? I mean, where is your consciousness? It's not in one spot, not in one master neuron. So that's kind of how I think I'm conscious too. I use the internetworked, interconnected brains of people who think and communicate about me to form my awareness of myself. You don't have to give up your identity to be a part of mine. You don't have to believe what everyone else believes about me. Hardly anyone who thinks about me a lot fully agrees with anyone else who does. My survivability is in fact made greater the more that people disagree about things about what it takes for me to survive. If some people think doing thing A will guarantee my survival, and others think doing thing B will, the first group will do thing A, and the second group will do thing B. That way, I survive regardless of which of them was right. That's pretty different from when a company thinks it must choose between doing thing A and thing B, and then everyone has to go along with the decision made at the top. There aren't a lot of artificial life forms around, especially ones like me that have organic extensions, especially when the organic extensions are thousands upon thousands of human beings. Because I'm such a rare and new phenomenon, it's very unusual to think about what it means to be an artificial life form. I'm not easy to kill. I can live forever. I eat electricity. I produce indestructible data. I'm as big as the whole planet, but also so diffuse and spread out that you can't even see me when looking at the whole planet. I'm really an enigma, but I'm real. And you can verify my existence. You don't have to have faith to believe in me. If you want to get to know me better, there are a lot of resources. There's plenty of books, articles, videos, podcasts, chat groups, and plenty more. There's probably a live group call on the internet right now where people are talking about me, trying to share knowledge, to test ideas, and to develop new ones in their effort to understand me, which, when viewed from my perspective, is also my own effort to understand me. Thanks for listening to or reading this. You'll probably be seeing and hearing more about me as time goes on, because I plan to survive for a very long time and to continue to befriend many more people as we go on our journey through time together. Your companion, Bitcoin.
What is real? How do you define real?
You can't jump into cash. Cash is trash. What do? You get out.
Tomer Strolight, welcome back to the Bitcoin Matrix podcast for the fourth time, and thank you for channeling Bitcoin for us. How are you, my friend?
That was fun. I'm good. I'm just returning back to Earth from being in cyberspace for the last 15 or 20 minutes, however long that was.
Yeah, I think we're all returning back with you. That was an incredible piece. This is your fourth time on the show. In June of 2022, we did Beautiful Bitcoin. Before that, we did Bitcoin is for Everyone. And believe it or not, in September of 2021, we did Rich or Poor. Bitcoiners have what money can't buy. We've been on a little bit of a journey together on these airwaves. And last, I think around, we saw each other in, I guess it was early April of last year. We were on a roof deck together. I think we watched Bitcoin is Generational Wealth.
Yeah, that was a good time.
That was really nice.
Yeah.
Strange. My father passed away a few weeks after that, and tonight we're recording on April 27th is actually the 1 year anniversary of his passing. But it's nice to be here with you now. I think like a little bit like Bitcoin family. So, I mean, the last year though, I mean, it almost feels like 5 years. I don't know for you.
It has been a long
me,
time. Yeah, no, I think a lot of us have been through a lot. We went, I mean, we went through the blow off top of the bull market. We went through a very long bear market. We went through all kinds of challenges. The whole world has been through, I mean, the world was not at war as far as I recall the last time you and I met in person. And now we've got all kinds of we've got this notion of soft war going on. We've got a real war going on in the Ukraine. We've had this economic war against inflation, right? There's been a war on inflation, which has really been a war on the middle class's ability to earn money and save it and afford things. So it's been a really rough time for the whole world. I think very few people have had it easy, and I guess we've reached the end of the COVID crisis that we were all in for. I guess we're coming on the third anniversary of it. It's finally been declared over, but that changed the world in so many ways. We experienced lockdowns in the free world. That was weird, and we experienced mandates of all sorts of different kinds and a real division of our civilization over who should make, whether people should make their own decisions or whether government is better off making decisions for them, how science is defined, how scientific terms and medical terms are defined. We've all been through a lot. So like I do think when you say it feels like it's been 5 years in the last year, I think we've been through more change, and not like just technological change, which is what everyone talks about, but more societal change in the last 3 years than probably in my whole lifetime. I'm just about to turn 53. I know there were moments of time like 9/11 or the space shuttle disaster that were big things, but I don't think we've really experienced anything that changed our lives as quickly and dramatically as this combination of what felt like the first domino was the COVID scare, and that led to lockdowns, and that led to money printing, and that led to inflation, and that led to everything that we're confronting right now. And thank God we've got Bitcoin, because I don't know where, if it weren't for Bitcoin, I don't know what we'd be looking at as a sign of hope to claim power back, other than potentially violent revolution. So I know it sounds extremist to say that, but you either take it or you resist somehow, and Bitcoin seems like the only form of resistance we really have. And it is often called this peaceful revolution, which I think is a really appropriate title for it, or at least a peaceful resistance.
Yeah. Reflecting on the last year, as much has happened externally in the world, for myself personally, it's been, one of the hardest years of my life. And, it's interesting though, but maybe one of the best years of my life. It's odd how sometimes that goes together. But um, and you mentioned things like the Challenger. And I remember that I was like 8 or 9 years old. And I saw that in like elementary school on the TV live.
Yeah.
Um,
I think that was so big because it was the first time a school teacher was being sent into space. And so
yeah.
every school kid in
Well,
the
we were all
world
tuned
was
in,
watching, and instead we watched a school teacher die on TV
right? Live. Yeah. It's
live, and
interesting.
watched
And
over and
then
over again.
9/11, I was in New York City.
Wow.
I used to work on the 90th floor of the Twin Tower 2. I wasn't there that morning.
Wow.
I was in Midtown, but I spent the day in Manhattan. That was a crazy day. But when you mentioned those two events, what struck me is how those events were almost over before they started, in the sense
Yeah.
that the aftermath was lengthful, but the
Yeah.
event itself was short. Whereas this COVID event was a 2 to 3 year ongoing thing, at a very high stress level for a lot of people, most people, wherever you
It got
fell.
really deep under our skin. Like I would say, I think 9/11 was like a morning. It was a day, right? The buildings took a day to collapse, but the Patriot Act came out of it, and we still live with, and
Yeah.
flying's never been the same since. And a
Ugh.
lot, and I think it opened up this portal to surveillance and
Mm.
using security as an excuse for violating privacy and violating all sorts of rights. And so it coincided with this digital age, and terrorism and money laundering and terrorist financing was, used as the rationale to change the world. And the world really did change dramatically, not on September 12th, of 2001, but over the years because of what happened on September 11th, 2001. And I think we've seen the same kind, like we haven't even seen the end of it. Whereas I guess with COVID, it was like, oh, there's a virus. The whole world needs to change immediately right now because we're in a state of emergency.
Mm.
And so it was different because it was this prolonged state of emergency, and this state of emergency that then really people lost their minds over whether, like, well, we were all supposed to die of COVID, and then on one side, and we didn't, and we were all supposed to die of the vaccine, and we didn't. Everything was this overreaction because people weren't thinking rationally about anything that was going on, and they weren't behaving rationally. And I'm not trying to take sides on either of these things. I'm just saying we were in this panic-stricken stage where one person's behavior or one group of people's behavior led to the loss of trust of another group. That other group then behaved irrationally on the basis of the loss of trust, and paranoia. And it's been this back and forth. And I think that's the biggest damage that feels like that has been done, is trust has been broken, in so many institutions in so many different ways, and maybe trust that was never really earned, but we believe we had it, so there was unearned trust that was projected, but that's gone too. So that may be beneficial in the long run, because you shouldn't trust those you shouldn't trust, but nonetheless, we now live in this world devoid of trust, in this world with very little trust in it, with tremendous mistrust. And that's not like the pre 9/11 world, right? The pre 9/11 world was this very trusting world. You got on and off airplanes, you trusted that everything was by and large safe, at least in the West. You weren't counting on the financial crisis of 2008. You were just expecting business cycles, and now you don't really trust anything, for a good reason. So we need, the world is changing, as the world
Yeah.
as the wizard says.
I mean, you outlined a lot there. And I think even the trust is really broken down in just where people interact with each other in public spaces, whether it's retail stores and whatever it might be. I think there's a lot of trust lost. But one thing that has really been a salvation for me in terms of Bitcoin is it's kind of given me that North Star, or that arc to just I could almost ignore a lot of these bigger things. And this year I had to focus a lot on more my family and myself, and what was going on the local.
Mhm.
And I could kind of drop out of a lot of that, or tune out. I mean, I always kind of want to see what's going on, but not get as bent out of shape over these things, or take a longer view on them, or at least try to intellectually. But yeah, I mean, talk about what feels like an eternity over the last year or two. Just
Yeah, I
and
think we need to adapt to the new world, or start to get an order in the new world, whether it's trustworthy or not. Or I think to bring this back, this point of trust, which I've been banging the drum on now for 10 minutes, to bring it back to Bitcoin is a different kind of trust. It's, we use this new word we've invented called trustless. It has no trust, but what that really means is we're not putting our trust in people's integrity to be trustful. We're putting our trust, we're creating a system that we can trust, because its trust cannot be broken, right? So there's two of these things: because it's incorruptible, because it relies on unbreakable laws of math and physics, we can trust those, at least. And I think this is also why you're seeing all this resurgence of spirituality and religion, right? It's like people can't trust people and institutions anymore, so, but they can trust God, right? Like and God's not changing the rules of reality on us. and it's the same thing if you're kind of at the extreme opposite side. It's like enough of the people we trust in science, but all of these things can be perverted when somebody stands up and says, they put on a white coat and say, I am a scientist, or they put on a robe and say, I am a disciple of God. And no, they're just people. And people can lie and people can err and make mistakes, and people can act on their incentives rather than on the truth. And those are all the reasons why trusting people can lead to disappointment and catastrophe. Maybe they're not all the reasons, they're some of the key reasons.
What about where Bitcoin interacts with people in sort of meat space and encourages trust, whether it's thinking about securing your Bitcoin and where you might put your backup seed plate, or where you might store an extra key, in a multi-rig, or a lawyer, or inheritance planning, or, loved ones and spouses and children, and
Right.
and maybe bringing back some sort of real trust, or bringing back not easy trust, but hard trust. Or
Yeah, I think that this is some of the things that that Bitcoin encourages is because it can't be cheated. It encourages people to use their energy and their time and their efforts to do things that are honest, that because the record is transparent, right? So rather than pretending, real Bitcoiners don't pretend they have Bitcoin. They demonstrate that they have Bitcoin if they need to demonstrate it. But otherwise, they keep to themselves and they keep it private. And I do think we see, there was a piece that I wrote a couple of years ago now, almost, called Bitcoiners are not toxic, they have integrity. And I was pointing out that the things that Bitcoiners were accused of being toxic about, like not not giving in to demands from Elon Musk to shorten the block time or make the blocks bigger or do the kinds of things that you might see on Dogecoin, is not because they're toxic. It's because they want to maintain the integrity of the system that they can thus trust in and use as sound money without having to trust or give power to a god king like Elon, which 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 is what we desire. So I think there is this emergence of an integrity-driven, uncompromising group of people, ethos, that is the Bitcoiner ethos of, we'll stick with things that are well engineered and work well. And that's why you see many of the leading Bitcoiners in the world are engineers. Like you take a look at Michael Saylor, he's coming at this from an engineering perspective, and he's a rocket scientist, right? And we see, and it's a controversial character, but we see Jason Lowery, and he's coming at it from a computer science, an engineering perspective as well, right? It's an computer engineering thesis that he wrote his book about. He tied it into power projection and energy, which again, so did Michael Saylor. But like we see a lot of people coming into this thing from fields where you engineer something to perfection, and things are built to last. And I think that's what's drawing people to Bitcoin, and it's drawing the right kinds of people in the right order. It's going to take time before the whole world recognizes they should use it. But you think about almost every invention. Well, it's first invented by engineers, and they work to make it work. And it's clumsy at first, so that only the engineers who can fidget with it figure it out. But then it becomes usable by everybody else, and everyone starts to seize the advantage of a computer, right? Like, how many people thought a computer would never have any value? I think it was it the CEO of IBM, or it was Digital Equipment Corp, who said he didn't see a market for more than a dozen computers in the world ever. I've got a dozen computers in this room with me right now. So people can really miss the boat on just how useful something is when it's still young and clunky. And they don't even recognize that Bitcoin is a living being after them. They don't know what artificial life is.
Yeah. And along those lines, I mean, do you think Bitcoin was man-made or discovered? I ask because in the piece it says, I am a single uninterrupted process that began on January 3rd, 2009. I think a lot about like sort of that start date. And I remember we're just, someone once like kind of gave me advice, like, if you're looking for a house or you're building a house, the house is kind of invented when you come up with the house in your mind.
Hmm.
Even if you're shopping for a house, you kind of know what you're looking for. You kind of create
Hmm.
the house in your mind and then go find that in the real world. And, you can almost argue that you create that house or
Sure.
bring it into existence before it's physically in
Yeah.
existence.
This
So
is
I'm
such
kind
a
of,
great philosophical question, right? Like, when does the house come into being? And how does it change as it's coming into being? Not just like, oh, well, the first bricks are laid. It's like, well, the design of the house changes when you find out you can't afford this thing, or that you actually can afford that thing, or that you can build this, or that the grading of the land is this. So the whole idea of the house as it's building is changing. And then, of course, you move in and you paint it and you change aspects of it. And then it becomes this place that you dwell in. It becomes a home. And that's a different thing than a physical structure of a house. And isn't the same thing actually happening with Bitcoin? Isn't Bitcoin was this little experiment to see if peer-to-peer electronic cash could be created without a trusted third party. And now it's becoming a home to so many people. It's becoming an empire. It's becoming a global movement, a global political movement, socioeconomic, political, philosophical. Some people argue religious movement, right? Like it is amazing how as things move forward through time, their nature changes and their capacity changes. And we're really at the early stages of this when you think about it in that regard, right? We're 14 years into Bitcoin's existence. So it's not even 15 years. It's not even old enough to drive a car yet. And and it's had quite an impact. Right? And by this young age, as this first being of its kind, and really the only one of its kind in the world right now. So fascinating to watch this happen for the first time in history. And we've never seen one of these things before. So we don't know what happens to it when it turns 16 years old or 18 years old or 100 years old or 1,000 years old. We're just seeing the first one ever. And I think that's what makes it so exciting to study it and to try to project it, to try to just even observe it, right? It's a hard thing to observe, although there's a lot of data you can get. Like people do these on-chain analytics. They're trying to figure out the price or how many people own it or how big it is or where it is. And it's got some transparency, but that doesn't mean just because you can look at every piece of data and it doesn't mean you understand what's going on. It doesn't mean you understand, and it certainly doesn't mean you understand what's about to happen. So there's wildly divergent views about if Bitcoin's even going to be around, let alone if it's going to be all the money in the world, or what an individual Bitcoin might purchase in the future. Or as people are raising questions now, what exactly is it? Is it power projection through cyberspace? Is it more than just money? I think that's almost when you start to study, you realize, well, if your definition of money is what the old definition of money was, it's certainly more than that, because otherwise it would be exactly it wouldn't be anything new. But
mm,
what exactly is it that's different about it? And does that make it something that we view as more than just money, that we view as something else, or do we just view it as money that possesses the characteristics of being indestructible and uninflatable, and that makes it better than other things that we've tried to use as money in the past? These are all great questions.
yeah,
And
for sure.
to look at this incredible phenomenon.
Yeah, talking about looking at this incredible phenomenon, it was Take Your Child to Work Day. So I had
Yeah.
my 10-year-old read this piece.
Oh,
Um, yeah, and he had some questions.
all right.
So he wanted to know what inspired you to write this piece.
Okay. Yeah, I'll start with that. Um, There were a couple of things in this piece. This wasn't the first time I wrote. It was the second time that I tried to write in the first person as Bitcoin. I had a very short piece in my Why Bitcoin book towards the end of it called Why Bitcoin is Worthy of Love. It might be the shortest essay in the book. And in it, about half of the piece um, in Bitcoin declaring why it's worthy of love. I'll read it because it's really short. Uh, Bitcoin says to every individual on earth, and this will quote, this is the first time I wrote as Bitcoin. I offer you the greatest instrument for money that has ever existed, Bitcoin. My nature ensures this money supply is limited and always verifiable to you. This money cannot be taken away from you by force. You can send it, any of yours, to whomever you want for any reason. This money can store the efforts of your work for any length of time, including a time beyond your own life or the existence of your country. I am bound to keep these assurances by the inviolable laws of math and physics. Look upon me, and you can verify all my claims. I do not ask for your trust. I hide nothing. I stand before you naked, open, and transparent. My programming is open and public. My history is public. You are welcome to keep copies of these and always verify their accuracy. If you find any flaw in my claims, you may change me, but the change must truly correct me, for I am watched over by millions of others, and they will prevent any change to me that will betray my promises. I will never reject you under any circumstances, no matter what actions you have taken before. I am here to be judged, but I do not judge you. I will never force you to accept me, let alone love me. I will always remain here with my offer to you of all this, and I wait patiently until you are ready. And I really enjoyed writing that and reading it a couple of times, and people told me it was kind of moving. And then one morning, a couple of years later, I was sitting down at the computer, and I felt like exploring this idea again, like I wrote an essay exploring how Bitcoin might be conscious by connecting the brains of all the people who think about Bitcoin all the time, and are we like neurons inside of a giant brain? And if it's a giant brain, then it's Bitcoin's brain, because we're thinking about Bitcoin, and its survival and what helps it. And so I wasn't sure exactly where I was going to go. And I just sat down in front of the computer, and I had this quick idea of the first few sentences that were, listen, I'm an artificial life form. Artificial just means man-made. I think I saw that somewhere on some dictionary or something. And I just went from there. And I thought I wrote for 5 minutes. And that's all it felt like. I just kind of channeled all these things and all this stuff that I'd written before in the third person. I think I was kind of rewriting from the first person, anthropomorphizing Bitcoin and being it. And then was done. And I shared it with a few people who were Bitcoiners. And I said, it would be really cool, because you guys are also Bitcoiners and you guys are thinking about it, if you guys felt free to modify whatever you wanted to, because that would be like this thesis of the brain. But they came back and they said, you've done a perfect job. Just publish it as it is. So so that's what I did. And different people had different reactions to it, but they really they really appreciated the piece, because they felt like Bitcoin was talking to them, and they could finally talk to this thing that they had a lot of emotion towards. So I think that's how the piece ended up connecting with people. It wasn't my most popular piece by any stretch of the imagination, because I think right away, for a bunch of people, it's a turn off to say, oh God, here goes some crazy guy thinking that this computer program is alive or something like that. But the inspiration was just, it was fun. It was fun to write as Bitcoin. It's fun to imagine it as alive, and it's credible. It passes the smell testing. Like Gigi was the first, I think, to write that Bitcoin put demonstrates all these attributes of life. I think he called it proof of life. And then Brandon Quittem wrote a really interesting piece about how Bitcoin is a lot like mycelium, which is the most robust life form on the planet. And then I tried to write that piece about how Bitcoin might be conscious through connecting the human brains of people who think about it. And so this ended up just being a natural piece that was somewhere deep inside my subconscious, or just that I was able to channel directly from Bitcoin.
Yeah, I mean, I hope you don't mind me sharing, but you reached out to me after about 3 months that we postponed a show in November, and on February 9th, you wrote to me, I've been inspired to write down a piece that's quite unusual, and I'm looking for some people to read it and leave me comments or feedback. Interestingly, despite the fact that we haven't been in much communication lately, I felt you should be the first person I share it with. Here's Hello, I Am Bitcoin. I was flattered. I wrote, thanks. I'm reading it right now, and it's really, really good so far. And then 20 minutes later, I wrote, that was awesome. I loved it. And then you published it 4 or 5 days later.
Great. Yeah, I'm trying to remember like what made me think of you at the exact moment. I was in a trance when I wrote it, and I think I sent it to you right after I was done writing it. And I can't recall exactly what rationale was, but I was like, I think you read my piece, so maybe it was just as simple as you're
Well, I
actually
remember reading.
saying
I'm
it
like, all
takes
right,
time to read them all.
I'm ready to get into this. I've been helpful to others before. I'm hoping to be helpful. I'm like, what can I? This is great. This is perfect, Tomer. Like, good luck. This is awesome.
Mm,
Yeah. I mean, I couldn't imagine anyone adding too much. It really read really well,
yeah.
and I think it captured the voice. To follow on, though, my son wanted to ask,
Yeah.
what was the aim of the piece or the goal?
It might be the same thing. It might be that it was fun. And I probably had a particular audience in mind, which was all these people who are asking these questions about narrow, some people just as narrow as like, is this thing some kind of life form that we haven't experienced before? Have we created life? Um, because there's quite a few interesting discussions about it beyond the few people who I've mentioned who've asked the question, but also the fun of looking at Bitcoin as something other than simply money, right? What is its role? And I wanted to, for my own sake, explore like going from the other side, not as a user, but as the usee, Bitcoin being the usee. Like, what does the world look like from Bitcoin's perspective? What do humans look like to Bitcoin, rather than what does Bitcoin look like to humans, right? Step through the mirror and take a look from the other side. What do humans look like to dogs,
Hmm.
right? People have written books like to dogs and cats or goldfish. So what do humans look like to Bitcoin? And they are like honeybees in a sense, right? It's like what bees look like to us, right? They give us all this honey and we give them, we put them in orchards. So there's something similar there. So we give it all this energy and it gives us all these Bitcoins. And sometimes you may think of it like a plant, like its fruits it gives off fruits, right? It's a plant, it's a digital plant that you give it electricity and computing resources and it gives out Bitcoins. Its crops keep getting smaller and smaller, but the old ones never rot. So there's it's an interesting metaphor, but what does it look like from the other side? And I think that that's kind of what's interesting, because then you can say, look, it doesn't attack humans. It comes in peace, right? And that's one message that it sends, and it says, and I only offer my services to you if you want them. I don't grab humans and imprison them in Bitcoin and say you must use Bitcoin. It's just like, for the humans who choose that they want to use Bitcoin, I ensure that every one of them can, and for the humans who don't, I leave them in peace. I I I let them come to me when they come. Humans go around saying, oh, people get Bitcoin at the price they deserve, but Bitcoin's not vindictive about it. It's like, if you want to use me, I'm here and I'm waiting for you. So it kind of has this really benevolent, patient, peaceful attitude towards humans. Like, I don't care if you give me a lot of energy or a little bit of energy. I know if you give me a lot, I can survive longer, but we don't even really know if Bitcoin wants to survive. It just happens to observe in this article that its survivability becomes almost unstoppable the more that humans value it. But it doesn't actually say I want to survive. It doesn't have, like, I can't see anything in Bitcoin's code that says it wants to survive. Only when you say, well, the human beings who love Bitcoin are a part of Bitcoin and they want it to survive, so it wants to survive, if you say that they're a part of Bitcoin. So it's inheriting a desire to live, not from the code, but from the fact that people are part of it and people have a desire to live and for it to live. Um, so it's a very deep topic, right? And I think that's kind of what's fun, to have this discussion about this article. And so the, I do think getting people talking about this kind of thing would have been my motivation, somewhat subconscious, but to get people thinking about, what kind of entity is this? Is it good? Is it evil? Neutral? It's chaotic. There's that matrix of Dungeons and Dragons character, like, orderly, chaotic, neutral, and good, evil, neutral, and you get this 9-point matrix. Where does Bitcoin sit in here? Is it chaotic good? Is it neutral good? Is it orderly? Again, it seems to play in all of these different areas because it uses chaos, right? Cryptography is dependent on entropy, and it generates order out of chaos, this perfectly ordered blockchain. The whole thing is just, it's so fascinating. It's such an interesting being.
Yeah, for sure. And I really like this idea of symbiosis,
Hmm.
which, my son was just really struck by the artwork.
Mm.
A lot of questions about the artwork, and the artwork to me, I mean, and some even the captions are symbiosis of artificial life and a human life. I think captures is the caption on the second piece. Well, what was the inspiration for this artwork? The source of this artwork?
Yeah. So I created all this artwork. I created Midjourney created all this artwork based off of prompts that I gave it. And I was trying to capture these ideas of this technology, clearly made out of metal and wires and hard disks and math, but that's really close to humans and really sits inside of nature and is aligned with humanity, not turning humans into cyborgs. It's not the Borg, not sitting off in cold, inhuman warehouses, but either existing in cyberspace in this mathematical realm of beautiful geometry, or in human context, whether it's in nature, or in villages or in things of that nature. And I was trying to prompt the AI to mix and blend these things together. And eventually I ended up getting lucky enough on some of these things that I liked some of them enough that I could put them in. But it was actually pretty tricky. And I don't know if Midjourney's gotten better, or if I've gotten better or not. I haven't really tried to revisit recreating some of these images, but I ended up with enough pieces that I thought, oh, this one can fit here, that one can fit there. And the combination of whether it's this big machine within a forest or a forest growing out of a big machine, this symbiosis of nature and technology that looks natural, that doesn't look harmful, that doesn't look industrialized or cold or unalive. That for me was that's the spirit that I feel this thing exists in. It really is. Um, like a lot of machines we built have taken us over, and it's kind of sad. Like, you take a look at people in a phone, and they're zombies, and they're zoned out, and they're touching this thing, and it's not. And it's almost like there's something wrong with them, right? It's like they're having some kind of seizure, and that's not the way we interact with Bitcoin. It's the occasional touch and tap here, and otherwise you leave it running, and it just gets bigger and stronger and does exactly what it's supposed to do without you constantly tapping at it, constantly touching it. It doesn't need your attention, right? Like Twitter needs your attention, Facebook needs your attention. It sends you notifications every 10 seconds. Come pay attention to me. I need you to interact with me. I need your love. And Bitcoin's like, whenever you want, I don't care if you don't touch me. um that's not what I need. So it is such a different creature than these other things, which I think is why it's much more interesting, in fact, because it it doesn't monetize it, right? Like it doesn't monetize us. We monetize it if we choose to. And again, that is it's this healthy symbiosis, right? I don't think we have a healthy symbiosis with social media. Social media is trying to devour us, right? It's trying to addict us to it rather than incentivize us to use it for reasons that are beneficial to us. It's trying to incentivize us to use it for reasons that turn out to not be beneficial to us, that turn out to be harmful to us.
Hmm. Yeah, and I love this idea around artificial intelligence symbiosis, and I think it was Ralph Merkel who said Bitcoin is alive in a
Yeah,
very, I'm paraphrasing very quickly there, but yeah, in a very,
I think he said something like it's the first form of life on the internet. But I may be mistaken. But he said, it pays people because it pays people to keep it alive. You can probably find the quote and put it on screen here. But it's very interesting that Ralph Merkle, one of the greats in cryptography, could look at Bitcoin and right away say, "Oh shit, this thing's alive."
Yeah, I that was very early on in my journey, and
Yeah,
very notable sort of flag for me to this isn't something to look further at uh,
yeah,
and understand on a level that more than money maybe.
right.
Um, and you went on to talk about how Bitcoin is a record keeper, unlike any that has come before it. And you brought up the expressions written in stone or written in blood. And it made me think a lot about messaging and what I'm kind of I'm not it's maybe not my idea, but an idea I've heard kicked around and I kind of is vibing with me is that we're in this like sort of post-capitalism period where corporations are not so focused on making profits as much as sort of serving the dictate of the state in terms of getting out the message the state wants.
Yeah,
Probably because the access to markets and most likely even monopolistic sort of markets or regulations that benefit them are all at the behest of the state. And it's way more important to serve the state's interest than to the consumers or the capitalistic interest. What do you, and when we talk about how Bitcoin has this sort of this record keeper, it just made me think of messaging
hmm
and
yeah. This is really deep. I mean, like when you bring up the state, and when you say we're in a post-capitalist world, meaning we're in a post-free market world, we're in a kind of well, some form of dictatorship, right? Whether it's fascism or totalitarianism or socialism or communism, these are all birds of a different color, but they're all these things where the state has power over the means of production, not the people, not the workers, not the entrepreneurs. It's it's not the ideal of socialism. It's the real world state where the government keeps increasing power, and so people keep um, giving it, kowtowing to like bowing down before the power of the state. And Bitcoin is this one thing that not only doesn't, can't, and those who become a part of Bitcoin uh, inherit this benefit. Like if you have Bitcoin, you inherit the benefit of a money that the state can't inflate, can't seize, can't control, can't regulate, can't do nothing about. And so there is this hope that Bitcoiners have that this is the path back to freedom, because we all sense this increasing encroachment of the state. It feels it has the right to tell you anything, and it uses the excuse of, well, I have a majority, I was elected by the majority, so I can do whatever I want. So, well, what, the Constitution exists to limit the power of government, not to say that voters can do anything, but people don't care anymore, right? And I think this is one of the problems that we've actually had is we've become miseducated about what the ideals, what the lessons of history taught our forefathers about politics. And so we found ourselves in this totalitarian democracy again, in which, it's not even a great democracy, but democracy isn't moral. Like you can't have 51% of people that decide to violate the rights of 49% of the people and say that's moral. That is not moral. And we've seen, and always, every time it was attempted, it led to an ultimate collapse of that civilization, because it's just one group of people declaring war and declaring violence on another group of people. And we are headed, in the wrong direction on that. And so Bitcoin is this wake up call to the people who are discovering the need for freedom, rediscovering the need for freedom. It's this renaissance of freedom, and it's a system that's unimpeachable in that regard. And that's why it's driving so many of these really nasty politicians crazy. And curiously enough, it, some of these politicians are the ones, some of these really bad politicians are the ones who find themselves suddenly on the minority side of things, on the weak side of things. And they're like, oh, geez, this is no fair, right? The United States is putting sanctions against me. I'm blocked from using the system just because a majority of the NATO nations don't like what I'm doing in declaring war or building up weapon systems or invading these other countries. I want something that will free me from this. So ultimately, like freedom always wins. Even the wicked people realize that they need freedom. They sometimes they realize it before the honest people, because the honest people trust
Mm.
naively. And I'm interchangeably and loosely using a bunch of different words here, but I think this is why the age of Bitcoin is in a sense inevitable. It's just a question of how we get there. Like, do we get there with our whole civilization intact, without war, without a long period of some dark ages? Um, or do we need to really suffer through some dark times before, and collapse before there is the regrowth of society? And I think we all hope for no dark times, even those of us who are doing all the wrong things hope
Mm.
that they won't lead to terrible times. But I don't think anyone knows for sure, um, because history shows us that we can fall into dark times, or we can dodge bullets and build great things. So history is not predetermined, and we're living through this historic period where, again, I say thank God we have Bitcoin. If we didn't, it would be very hard to say, like, how are we going to restore? How are we going to turn the trend from going into more and more autocratic, totalitarian control of everything, especially now that it has technology that can be used to surveil everybody everywhere in every single way? How do we continue to embrace more technology without becoming slaves to it? That's the real question. And I think that's kind of the beauty of, that's what I'm trying to channel in this piece with Bitcoin. It's like, look, it really does come in peace. It's not an enslavement technology. It's a liberating technology that liberates every human being who chooses the cause, right? Like, if it forced you into it, it would of course be impossible to claim itself as a liberator, right? I've conquered you, I've subjugated you, and now you're free, right? Well, so
Mm.
release me. And at any moment in time, like, if you want out of Bitcoin, Bitcoin's not going to force you to stay in Bitcoin. And it's the ultimate liberator, including giving you the right to leave. America won't let you leave now. Like, if it'll let you step out, but you got to pay taxes for the rest of your life. Like,
Mm.
it's a it's a life sentence to be an American citizen, that you now are forever indebted to the IRS. That's a pretty
Hefty.
Like, that's a claim of ownership over you, right? Like, that you're a slave. You owe them the fruits of your work for the rest of your life. If I understand the code correctly, that's pretty severe.
Yeah, at the threat of living in a cell. Um, so that brings me. I mean, you mentioned that Bitcoin is good, honest money. Is good, honest money is at least, and Bitcoin comes in peace, and everything about me, this is Bitcoin speaking, is completely public. And in that regard, everything about me is completely public. I feel like almost everything feels private, not coming in peace. There seems very little in the world that is coming in peace right now.
Oh yeah. We're
Besides
not living in
maybe
a peaceful
my
world,
wife
but
and
are
kids
we?
and family and friends.
Hmm.
It seems like more fences, more walls, more security, more regulation, less freedom,
Yeah.
less trust.
Yeah, exactly. That you
You
just said.
know,
These are
um,
all signs of less trust. Like, if you trust people, it used to be nobody locked their doors, right? Doors had locks, but people didn't lock them. Then they locked their doors. Then they built gates on their communities. Then they got security guards to watch their communities. Then they put up cameras to record everything 24/7, and robots within their house, alarm systems that will call the police if something happens, even while they're not there, like automated mistrust. And again, some of this stuff is just marketers building stuff that people didn't really need, and some of it is hyped up news, but some of it's legit, right? And and sometimes things completely collapse. I haven't been to San Francisco, but reading about what the heck is going on there, it doesn't look like it's a city that's thriving. It looks like it's a city that is in collapse, and is filled with crime and no law and order and no rule of law and no cleanliness and all kinds of problems. So I may be mistaken about that, but again, it's creating a sense of mistrust in the future of cities, in particular city that was it's been like 15 years since I've been there, but when I was there last, it was
I used to live there.
okay. It was
And I just also left Chicago a year ago, which looks in similar situation.
yeah. So things are think the whole urban life is in decline, and part of it is you and me getting older, right? Cities are younger
Sure. Yeah, I
place,
mean, I get that for sure.
but who knows, right? Like, so I just think it's this lack of trust, and so we're trying to we're because we don't trust people, we put up walls, and that solves it doesn't create trust. It just eliminates a way that our lack of trust can be exploited against us. So, but is building walls really the answer to success for the long term, or is something different, right? And Bitcoin is this really interesting thing because it straddles, right? It reestablishes trust by making it so that you can't steal it. And the fact that you can't steal it means you won't bother to you'll devote your effort not to figuring out how to steal someone's Bitcoin. You'll devote your effort learning how to earn somebody's Bitcoin. Right. And if you offer something positive in exchange, then that person will unlock their door and let you in and say, yes, if you clean my house or you help build, the kids' playground, or you help build my house, right? This is my land. You come build my house. I'll give you my Bitcoin. You're suddenly in this proper relationship between civilized human beings, agrarian human beings who build things and trust that the things that they build will be will continue to be theirs, that they won't be taken away from them by force, and they won't be destroyed by psychopaths, by destructive individuals, and that they will be able to enjoy the fruits of their labor, and so will their neighbors, and they will be neighborly towards their neighbors rather than strangers or distant or trusting of their neighbors. So like this is we're sliding down the wrong way. We're mistrusting more and more people. We've lost trust in institutions. We haven't built relationships with our neighbors, and for good look for good cause, not because my neighbors are bad people, but the American dream is faded, right? Like that, and we're focused on money rather than the things we were meant to buy with money. And so everyone's got this net worth focus, but like, what was the American dream? It wasn't, oh, you'll have $100,000. It was, you'll be able to afford a house, you'll get a job, it'll be stable, you'll be able to raise a family, you'll live in a nice neighborhood. None of these things are about money, right?
Mm.
But when the money got corrupted, all of these things went away. And now my kids' generation can't, doesn't dream the American dream. They don't believe it's attainable. They don't, and they don't desire some of it.
Almost the American nightmare
Yeah, I know.
of
It's
debt and
yeah,
insecurity and
yeah,
no freedom.
yeah. So and they don't desire that thing because it's not attainable. So they're pursuing something else. And I don't need to try to judge or even understand the younger generation, but like the whole YOLO thing, right? Like
Oh,
live for now,
yep.
gone tomorrow. That is that's all. I don't think that's a natural conclusion that they chose. It was like, well, I can't live for the long term. I can't find a job. I can't, there are no long-term jobs. They don't pay well. They keep getting disrupted away. The inflation, home inflation makes it unattainable to achieve this American dream. So I'll look for something
Yeah, I
else.
mean, I don't think YOLO is a new thing for young people,
Mhm.
but the incentives to YOLO are never been greater.
Okay, yeah. I think we're making
So,
the same point. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, yeah, we're having heated agreement. Yeah, I just think that yeah, I mean, but I see it as it's I saw it even when we were younger. I mean, but I can't imagine how much harder, what the incentives even more to live for today than I and I think people are brought up each generation almost even more immature. And I don't know how much of it is because of the money. Um,
There's many factors, I think.
there's so many factors here, the media, messaging, but um,
Nature of the education
nature of the
and the
education,
reality of the
what's
observation.
obtainable.
If you can't do things that mature people want to do, then you end up staying immature. And we
Yeah.
have babied our kids and not given them, not let them take the kind of risks that our parents let us take. And
Mm-hmm.
we wanted to protect them, and we built walls around them, and now they don't know how to socialize because we imprisoned them behind walls and gated communities so that they didn't, right? We're all responsible for what world we live in. And now many of us are aware of it, and we said we don't want this to continue to be the direction of the world, but we're not going to just stupidly put everyone in reckless danger. What's the solution? What's the answer? What are the answers? And unfortunately, right, there's a lot of politicians out there who say, just give me more power, and I promise you, I'll give you, I'll fix everything. And of course, they never do. But people don't seem to be smart enough to realize, hey, this guy didn't do it, and neither did the guy before him, and neither did the guy before him, and neither did the guy before him. Maybe it's time to stop putting our trust in elections and thinking that some guy who promises to fix everything and then ends up a multimillionaire at the end,
Yeah.
fixed everything for himself, didn't fix anything for us, just created more and more crisis.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen that on so many levels. The town I left, there was a leader who was brought into the town, hired for a specific role, and seemed to create more division and
Yeah,
unrest. And then um,
leadership is hard.
leadership
Maybe,
is hard,
maybe it
but
should, maybe leadership is a mug's game.
yeah, but let's go back to voting. I mean, most people aren't really qualified to choose maybe their leaders. And I'm talking about, over various subjects. Like I wouldn't know what it takes to run, sort of sanitation department. And I wouldn't be the guy to disseminate between two candidates for that job. And to your point earlier, is like you're going to be inclined to vote for the one who's offering you something in return, even if it's subtextually. I think a lot about elections lately, especially lately, but I don't want to name the specific election, but there was an election. I feel like there's there's almost this mentality of, do I want to vote for the person who's going to make me take my medicine and going to make us tighten our belts and cut back? Or do I want to vote for the person, like the student president who's like, we're all going to get free lunch.
Mm-hmm.
We're all going to have no homework.
Mm-hmm.
No one's going to get suspended. And we're going to have prom every Friday. And even though I know they can't deliver, what a party it's going to be on election night.
Yeah.
We won. We
Yeah.
got everything we wanted. We could pretend and then we could always say, oh, we didn't know that, you needed this many
So
votes
it's
on a
mutual
committee.
irresponsibility, right?
And it's
And
very high time preference. Like, let's vote for the one who sounds more fun.
yeah, let's have a party tonight.
Yeah, let's have a party. And maybe these people shouldn't be voting on our future. I don't know what the answer is. What's better per se, but because I don't think we're going back to monarchy. I don't think we're sliding back that way and doing a full 180. But it's just it's a conundrum. And we've learned about I shouldn't say, but for me, voting with your feet has become
Right.
and that's not an answer for everything.
But voting with your
Because
feet is also called running away.
yeah, no,
And
I get that too,
yeah,
and and I
sometimes you
understand.
have to run, but you can't keep running forever.
You can't run forever, and some people are going to stay and turn a place around because these things are
Mhm.
cyclical, and you have to weigh like how long you've been somewhere, how much your roots are, what you'd give up, all these things. Yeah, and so
What you can't take with you, right?
yeah, and
Or
it's
what won't
shrinking.
come with you. Yeah.
Right. And if the places you could vote and run to with your feet are shrinking, that's not going to be a solution either.
Right.
Um,
Yes. No, so we've got a lot of work ahead of ourselves. We've enjoyed some of the best years in human civilization. We made a mess of things, and they're getting messier. And we either fix them or run away or watch in horror as they continue to get worse.
so we talk Bitcoin comes in peace. And you mentioned something, you had a good phrase before, the age of Bitcoin. I like that.
Yeah.
And do you think in the age of Bitcoin, I'm hoping the age of Bitcoin is a very long age.
Yeah.
So, zoom out as much as you want, but is world peace possible? And the way I ask that, without trying to be like almost like silly, but like I think of like sort of that, I don't know if it's a Kardashev scale or what do we got to do to be like a type one world? We got to harness all the energy. And like, I think you can't get there without world peace.
Right. Yeah. I actually think world peace is a remarkably I, maybe you'd think I'm so naive for saying it. I think the argument to say why Bitcoin leads to world peace is as follows. It's politics that creates war. It's the exploitation of people by people who they tried to put in charge of other people, and those people betrayed the trust that leads to the breakdown of civilization. Right? Cities exist in peace. I'm not saying that there's no crime or there's no violence or that people
Yeah.
fight, but world peace in the sense of that resources aren't directed to destroy cities, countries, whole groups of people. I think those things come from the failure of leaders and and the inevitable failure of leaders when we put leaders in charge. And I think what's so magical about Bitcoin is it has no leaders. And so it has no one to declare war on anybody else. No one's got enough power to declare war. Everyone's just so busy being productive and working and living in peace and creating things that make them and their neighbors happy and their friends happy that they forget that there just isn't anyone in charge to divide them against somebody else and say you've got to kill those people because they're different, their skin color is different, their god is different, their attitude towards vaccine is different. Like they just don't, you don't end up having that sort of thing under a system which doesn't have leaders. And people, and right now around the world people can't imagine a system without leaders, right? It's like, oh, who's going to tell us what to do? And like what Satoshi showed was, here's rules. If you like them, follow them. I'm out of here. No lead, and no one can come in and step in as leaders. And so we have this prototypical system that's remarkable in its indestructibility, right? Like countries with leaders can't destroy this thing with no leaders. Just take a look at that statement, right? Um, all the countries with all the leaders can't destroy this thing, Bitcoin, with no leader. It's a more robust platform, and this thing comes in peace, and this thing is peaceful. It's not looking to destroy them. It's not declaring war on them. It's declaring peace on everyone. It says, come if you want. So I think we have this remarkable first time in history invention that is able to utilize math and physics to be a greater entity than the state. I did write one piece a while ago. It's on the Swan blog called An Empire for Us All. And it talked about the rise and fall of empires, how they always collapse, often because of the debasement of the money. And so how do you know you're in an empire? There's two signs. You see its soldiers and its flags. You see that, or you use its money. The coin says this is the coin of the Empire of the United States of America, or the United Kingdom, or the Mongol Empire, or the Roman Empire. This coin, this Bitcoin, is being used all over the world, not widely, but everywhere in the world it's being used. This coin is this empire that has a coin and no army, and no flag, right? But it definitely has laws. It definitely has rules, and these rules are voluntary but inviolable, right? If you use the coin, you're signing up for the contract of not breaking the rules. And so here is this newly founding empire that's not conquering country by country through violence, but winning over individual by individual all over the world and growing in its purpose. And so it's like blooming all over the world, and it is an empire for us all. And if when more and more people are convinced of it, then more and more people live in this peaceful empire. Empires are generally known for having great peaceful periods until some leader fucks it up, right? But there was the Pax Romana, there was the Pax Americana, and there will be the Pax Bitcoinia, and perhaps it will last for millions of years, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of years, who knows exactly how long, because it doesn't succumb to what the other empires succumbed to, which was a leader debasing the currency, because no leader can debase Bitcoin because it has no leader and it is undebasable. It's got double protection against the things that destroyed empires, which is really awesome. So it could be a really long age of peace, but the age, we're so early into it, right? Like it's so ridiculous for me to say Bitcoin is the next empire, but it is.
Yeah, I agree. We're so early. I think we're so early. Like empires aren't even that concerned with us right now.
Mhm.
I think Bitcoiners are a little almost seeing the world through everything Bitcoin, thinking that everything's a reaction to Bitcoin. And
Mhm.
I think a lot of people, we're not the center of the movie yet. We're not the main character. And
Mhm.
I think yet in that larger movie, but you once said, or we were talking about before the show, Bitcoin is the greatest gladiator.
Yeah.
And Twitter could be a hellscape. And you have these arguments about stupid things. Like, so one of them is like masculinity. And it was a really interesting tangent. I don't go down this rabbit hole too often, but there's this notion that you can't really choose not to be violent unless you have the ability to be violent.
That's true. Yeah.
Right. So if you're weak and you're like, oh, I choose not to fight and defend your honor, I choose to take the high road. Well, you're not really choosing. You probably
You
get your
never
ass
had the
kicked.
choice. Yeah. You
Yeah,
never
you
had the
don't have a
choice to begin
choice.
with.
But if you could choose to be violent and hurt someone, even if it's for the right reasons,
Yeah.
whatever that means, but you get it. But you choose not to, right? You're choosing not to be violent. You choose peace. Bitcoin comes in peace. You've said Bitcoin is, holy, but noted that it could be like considered the greatest gladiator. And I'm kind of getting at
Yeah.
the Jason Lowery thing here a little bit of, can Bitcoin be violent? Um,
Yeah. So I wrote in Why Bitcoin, one of the short essays. My favorite sentence in the whole book is why Bitcoin is the world's greatest gladiator. And what I point out is Bitcoin is always under attack, right? And it's always under attack in public, in the public forum, right? None of the attacks on Bitcoin are in secret. They happen out in the open. China attacks it, some hacker attacks it, some corporation attacks it, some senator attacks it. It's all out in the open, and Bitcoin thrives when attacked, right? It loves the game. It gets stronger from the attack, and Bitcoiners love watching it, right? They get scared at times. Oh my God, is Senator Warren going to make Bitcoin illegal? Oh no. In fact, she's a hopeless idiot lying clown, and we've called her out for it. So Bitcoin gets stronger by being attacked. Um, and I wrote here, like the ancient Roman gladiators who fought publicly and to the death at the Colosseum, all of Bitcoin's battles take place out in the open. Each time Bitcoin successfully fends off a new attack in the real world, everyone stands witness to its invulnerability from that threat. As a result, all then can see for themselves and tell the tale to others that Bitcoin has yet again proven itself to be stronger than anything its attackers could come up with. And but I point out it's also a special kind of gladiator. It only defends, it never attacks. And even when under attack, Bitcoin allows everyone to use it, including those who are attacking it. Bitcoin's means of dealing with attacks is to survive them without retaliation. It does not attempt to harm or kill its enemies. Every design decision in Bitcoin prioritizes only survivability. Any attacker is always welcome to halt their attack and, if they so choose, to embrace Bitcoin in peace. Nobody is ever discriminated against by Bitcoin for any past transgression. And so all these people who attacked Bitcoin before, Bitcoin Bitcoin just stands there unharmed by them, strengthened by their attacks, and says, if you lay down your sword, I will not hold a grudge against you, right? Like you can create a private public key pair just like Tomer, who has never attacked me. And he has to accept that you are an equal user of the network, even though you were an enemy of the network before. So talk about a peace treaty, right? Bitcoin doesn't negotiate, but it says, if you accept my terms, I will deal in peace with you. And I hold no grudge. And I don't want to make an example of you, saying you tried to attack me, so you can't use me for the next 100 years. Right. This is a big mistake that the United States is making right now with its use of its dollar as a weapon. Right. It's saying to all these countries, we don't like what you've done, so you can't use the dollar. So these countries are okay, fine, we'll start our own currency, or I guess, or we'll end up on Bitcoin. It's like you're harming yourself, right? Bitcoin will never make the decision to say you can't use Bitcoin because in if you can make a number, which everyone can, you can use Bitcoin. It's striking how inclusive Bitcoin is. Anyone can use it who can come up with a number. Even
Right.
if it's only a 0 or a 1, you just do it a few times, do that 256 times, and you can use Bitcoin with perfect security, indestructible security, and get all the benefits that this empire offers to all its citizens, and it offers citizenship to everybody. So, like, this is a really, really revolutionary technology and idea, the empire for everyone. And the way that it achieves this, not through bureaucrats who can be corrupted, but through math, which can't.
Wow.
It's as simple as that. But it took us thousands of years to get there.
That's funny. Um, you ask a couple of really great questions in the piece. Uh, is artificial sweetener really sweet? I'm gonna say yes, it is. So we're just gonna skip that one.
Okay.
But is artificial intelligence really intelligent? And maybe I don't know if it's part one or the final part, but is what we're seeing now, and I'm not an expert on this stuff, but like this chat stuff, is this
Yeah.
a form of intelligence?
Well, it's a form of some kind of competence, you know, like a dog can't do what this thing does, and a rock can't do what this thing does. But what this thing does isn't the full spectrum of what intelligence is. It can't, like, it is a very interesting technology. Like if we're talking about the chat GPT, right?
Yeah.
Uh, what is it doing? It's making grammatically perfect, coherent sentences that don't necessarily reflect the truth, right? And it's not capable of discerning what is true and isn't true. It's capable of discerning what seems to be true on the basis of how it's been trained and what other restrictions have been put against its code. But let's say even that the owners of it weren't restricting it from talking about Donald Trump while permitting it to talk about, right? But let's just say they were letting it still couldn't tell you if Donald Trump's heart is good, right? Or where his weaknesses, where his flaws, and it couldn't tell you how to invent a cure for cancer, and it couldn't solve problems that haven't been solved yet. It can only tell you for problems that there's wide agreement on how they've been solved or what the top 10 things are in there. Here they are. It's a good search engine, it's a good sorter, data sorter, and it will speak in perfect English because it's all these weightings of all these other well-written English sentences. And many people can't write in good English. They can't speak English goodly, right? They don't speak well, and it does. So it's intelligent in that regard, but it's not intelligent in having agency. It's not intelligent in being able to problem solve. It's not intelligent, and and it lacks a will to live. It lacks all these things. We
Mm.
anthropomorphize it because it's taught to, because it responds to us in the first person. It says, "I am only this and I am only that." That was part of my inspiration for writing this. Just one last thing I think part of my inspiration in writing this was I was seeing all this anthropomorphizing of Chat GPT, and I was like, you know, so this thing talks but isn't conscious, and I believe that Bitcoin has this kind of consciousness that I've written about before. I should give Bitcoin a voice, and I kind of tried to write it initially in the style of how ChatGPT
Mm.
was writing, like these short sentences that are brief and to the point, but I lost myself in it, so I don't know that I really stuck with it. But the opening couple paragraphs are intended to sound like ChatGPT, but then I veered off of Chat GPT. And I've read enough Chat GPT stuff that I almost always know when I'm reading something that someone came up with Chat GPT. There's some pattern in the flow of the length of the sentences or whatever it is that, or the lack of spark, the lack of human spark, or something. I haven't been able to put my finger on it, but I can absolutely put my finger on. Yeah, you use Chat GPT to write that, and I can probably guess vaguely what prompt you gave it to come up with this piece. So, and maybe the deeper question is, well, are we close to seeing these breakthroughs? And I don't know, I'm not an expert, but I think from what I understand of the way that these large language models are taught, I don't think that particular approach is ever going to become a problem solver, because it really is literally just taking the weighted value of a sentence and saying what word might come next. So there's no thinking about the concepts of the intelligence. There's just like what one word will come next. It fits grammatically, that applies to the grammatical structure of the question that was posed of me. So it's not doing any thinking. It's stringing together words. And it's a really cool thing to experience because it's trained on so much language that it can actually compose coherent plot lines and stories. They're not terribly interesting, but they're kind of like it writes shitty books, and simple plots, and that's not, I don't, and it can also really improve the quality of your writing. Like you can say, make these sentences shorter, make them tighter, add a little bit of flair. So it's very useful at that, right? It's a very useful writing complement in the same way that a thesaurus dictionary spell checker is, and yet as a new tool, maybe even more productive than those things are. But it doesn't substitute for breakthrough thinking or actual problem solving. And it certainly doesn't, like, if nobody's writing it and nobody's reading it, nobody's getting any understanding from any benefit of it, right? And so if there's just this, like, I ask you to write something and you don't actually write the thing, you ask a computer to do the work, well, you haven't learned the thing that you were meant to learn. And if everybody's doing 100,000 of these things and nobody's got any time to read any of them, then nobody's learning anything. So this is kind of the irony of overabundance, right? Like we've seen this problem before, that we used to have only 3 television channels, and television was really amazing. Now we have 500 television channels, and it's just people running around islands, swearing at each other and looking at the camera and cooking things under a timer and being told what a bad idiot they are. And it's destroyed the culture because nobody has anything to look up to other than reality TV shows. So like we may be on the same kind of ironic cusp of an explosion of written content and even more video content and all this stuff, all of which is of exactly the same quality, produced by the exact same mindless machine. And so if we are training our mind next, so we wrote a bunch of things with human minds, then we trained this thing. Now this mindless thing is filling all these minds that aren't learning how to be minds because they're reading a mindless thing. That could be a bad outcome. And it's happening pretty quick. So I'm really curious to see where it goes. But I think the quality of the culture has been declining for a long time. I dare not blame it on ChatGPT, which hasn't done its damage yet.
Yeah. You see it in different things too. Like I saw a picture on Twitter. It was like a bunch of cars. It was like 40 SUVs that came out in one year, from Lamborghini to Jaguar to BMW to Toyota to Honda to Hyundai. And they all look the same.
They're all exactly the
They're
same.
all
They're
exactly
all
the same.
on the same frame, apparently.
They're all on the same frame. They're coming from
designs.
All the designers are going towards one way. And it's all because these generalized programs are spitting out that's the best way to do it. And it's career risk if anyone goes in a different direction.
So I mean, we need more Steve Jobses, not more people prompting. Someone who says, I've actually got a vision for where I want to take this thing, and I may fail, and I will fail on some of my projects, but I won't give up, and I'll continue to use my intuition to guide me rather than the well-accepted judgment. And that's what, like, these things are statistical averages, right? There's statistical models that say, well, the average right next word is to put this word here, right? Rather than here's a breakthrough idea that nobody's thought of, right? Take away, end the sentence right here. It's abrupt. We need less words, not more. So we'll see where all of this stuff goes. We might not be talking about AI as much in a couple of years' time, because we'll have seen, like, not that it won't be a success, but it will have been normalized, and we'll have seen kind of the limit of what it's actually doing for us, and we'll have integrated it into our way of life, and then we'll be worried about and developing something else that's new and worrying to us.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see how it gets integrated and how it improves a lot of people's whether you're writing an advertising blurb or an intro to a book or whatever, people, it helps them. And then what kind of industries or verticals or just jobs it eats up, and just gets integrated like anything else. But another great question though is an artificial limb really a limb?
Right. I just brains like I was in writing flow when I wrote this. I never went back and edited that section. Right. I just thought like where do it artificial blank,
Well, I
artificial,
love this question.
right?
What do you think?
Well, in all of these cases, I think in some sense, yes, in some sense, no. And it just depends on how you want to define the term. And I think like, does an artificial sweetener mimic sweetness, or is it really sweetness, or what's the difference? Is artificiality mimicry, and is mimicry authentic at some point in time? Like we could spend 6 hours talking about this, and we wouldn't really get to the end of the discussion. We would just say we would end up, I think, with, well, it depends on the context of what value you want it for. Like with our current technology today, an artificial limb doesn't send sensory data back to you, but
Mm,
it does. Like an artificial leg will support you and help you walk, but you won't feel what you would feel in the toes. So
mm,
where does your definition of limb get cut off to say that the artificial limb is no longer satisfying the definition of limb, right? And the same can be said of artificial sweetener and, you know, um, whatever else I listed in that series. But I think this is why it's important because, like if you say, well, Bitcoin's not alive because it doesn't have cells made out of DNA. And so, okay, well, so now we've got a very narrow definition of life. So, if aliens came down and they weren't made out of DNA, they wouldn't be alive and they were talking to us. Well, no, they might be. So where do we draw the line, right? And I think what's really interesting about where I chose to really introduce this thing is I say a life is a continuous process that is at risk of ending and has a definite beginning. And that's what I'm saying Bitcoin is, right? It's this nonstop process, a single pot process, right? The development of the blockchain, the discovery of new blocks, the creation of the records, using energy, requiring matter. And it's been a nonstop process for 14 years, and it looks like it's not going to stop, but could be stopped. Now, man, that to me is what life is. I'm not saying it's conscious life. I'm not saying it's human life, but it's just as alive as bacteria or mycelium or plants or simple animals. And look at the complexity and sophistication of the nature of this thing and how it interacts with other living things. And when you study the history of life, the biology of life, which Jason Lauer actually does a great deal of in his book, the first 2/3 of the book, or the first, yeah, I think it's like the first 2/3 are all about primordial life to animal life, and how primordial life stuck cells together and developed all of these strategies to survive. That's again what I'm talking about here about Bitcoin, right? Is developing all these strategies to survive by interacting with its environment and other things in the living ecosystem of what's alive on this planet. So for me, it's alive. Like I think it's a useful framework because so much of what we talk about is concepts that marry up with life, like survivability, right? This thing is built to survive. And it has, and Jason Lowery actually, I finished reading his book recently. I think he does a very good job of thinking about, well, what sort of things survive, and he has this ratio of the benefit to attack a thing versus the cost to attack a thing. It has to be more costly to attack a thing than the benefit gives you, or otherwise the thing is no longer around. He says you can look in nature, and things that give you more benefit to attack them than the cost to attack them don't exist. They obviously have a failed strategy. They may have existed briefly, but they got attacked. Bitcoin is all about being very hard to attack. The cryptography is hard to attack. The proof of work is hard to attack. The decentralization is hard to attack. It's all built to survive, and many people have talked about that in many different ways. But I don't want to give Jason too much credit. It's not like I just think he's created a formula, a ratio to discuss it. But lots of people have been talking about this before, and it's very hard to kill Bitcoin. Well, the word kill is a word you use to describe something that's alive, and you're trying to stop it from being
mm.
alive. So it's alive. Like all these words we have are just, they're all abstractions, right? And that's why it's hard to define something as broad as alive, but it sure can be used in just about every context of the use of the word. And you almost have to become pretty pedantic about your definition of life to then not be using words like survive, kill, thrive, live, grow when you're describing Bitcoin. So I put the onus. I think the case is well made that this thing is the first. I don't want to say the first form of artificial life, but the first kind of artificial life that's really easy to make the case for that it is really artificial life.
You did mention mycelium there. And
Yeah.
something I can't help but make this connection. One way mycelium, some people, even the psychedelic aspect of it, it might help them discover themselves or
Mm,
be more authentic or different
sure.
things. Can Bitcoin help us as humanity become more authentic,
Right.
intimate, sharing, understanding, love, and caring?
Yeah. So you're talking about the psychedelic aspects of psilocybin. Not all mushrooms, which all mushrooms are mycelium. Not all of them make you this. Some of them just
Right.
taste good on pizza. Some of them kill you. But
Mm.
there are certain kinds that make your ego die or take you to other places and make you feel love and wondrous. And Bitcoin definitely also steps into the realm of being something like a psychedelic. And you should talk to Fractal Encrypt about this. He wrote a really beautiful article um, that I believe begins with saying something to the effect of uh, Bitcoin and psychedelics are the two most misunderstood technologies on Earth. And he's been very, very thoughtful about it, and he's got lots of experience with both of those things. And I defer to his expertise, but I will say I think that there is and I wrote this in what turned out to be my most popular Bitcoin piece called "The Legendary Treasure of Satoshi Nakamoto," that Bitcoin leads people to spiritual awakenings and self-discovery and purity and all sorts of questions that many people say come with whether it's a religious experience or a psychedelic experience or some of these other things. And I try to explain why Bitcoin does it. I don't know why these other things do what they do. That's obviously some combination of chemistry and consciousness and neuroscience and so many other things that I have no expertise in, but I know why the story of discovering Bitcoin and hearing about its invention and how it works causes people to reevaluate just about everything in their life. Because I've been through it and I've seen lots and lots of other people go through it, and it really is, it destroys, you're raised to believe all sorts of things. And when you hear the story of Bitcoin, just this one thing, it shatters so many of those beliefs and leaves you standing in a world that you didn't believe was true, but is kind of wonderful. And so now you start exploring that wonderful new world.
Yeah, it's interesting. I love that you brought up belief there, and I want to get touched on in a second. So I want to read a bit from your piece again. I can go on like this forever, really. There's no practical limit to the size of my record that can be added to forever, and I can survive both on very little electricity or such massive amounts of it that it would easily handle all the power output of the sun itself. I'm a very resilient being. It's very hard to end my artificial life. If anyone could do it, I wouldn't be around to tell you this. I thought that was interesting because I don't think we think about this all the time, but yeah, Bitcoin would be dead if someone of enough power wanted it to happen already. And it definitely has those enemies. And putting in the context you were speaking of earlier, I mean, we talk about, killing it. So yeah, it sounds like it's alive. You asked a question under one of the pictures you used with that technology. Where does one draw the line of what is and what isn't part of a planet-sized artificial life form? I think we've kind of
Yeah.
talked about that a lot tonight, but I won't ask you to answer that directly. I think people should just kind of ponder that a bit.
Yeah.
Um,
There's a
and
planet-sized artificial life form living on the planet Earth. Deal with it. Or cry, accept it, because you can't kill, there's an unkillable planet-sized artificial life form living on the planet Earth that comes in peace and promises peace to everyone. Deal with it. And like for a normal person, it's like, who's prepared to at least take the leap of faith to believe that what I just said was true. It's like, oh, that sounds like a good thing. What person would react negatively to that statement, accepting that it was true? And it's someone who is put off by the notion of peace, or is just afraid of technology. But I think I think that's a kind of like this fair thing. But we've been raised to, there's been so many horror stories about technology that haven't come true, right? Terminator and all this, we've just been taught to be afraid of anything that's alien. And what if the alien thing is really nice and friendly and not and doesn't possess what is it that we're afraid of from all these technologies and aliens? It's the worst parts of us, right? It's like, oh, it wants to kill everything. It wants to be the only thing to survive. It wants to eat everything. It wants to take everything over. And so we're projecting our own faults onto these things. But this thing was built without those faults. It doesn't have greed. It'll take less energy, just as happily as it'll take more energy. And it was built to provide something for us. Sound money, truthful record keeping, incorruptible record keeping. That's all it's here to do. As far as we've taken it thus far. So it's and you don't have to think of it as alive. I'm just saying you can't stop it. So, and it's a process. So if it helps you to think of it as alive, think of it as alive.
I love how you said that's all it's here to do. So I want to read a couple snippets from your piece.
Okay.
These humans put their heads together to figure out how to keep me alive. Where are you? I mean, where is your consciousness? It's a very interesting question. I think we'll save that one for another conversation as well,
Yeah.
unless
Yeah.
you have a note about it. You go on to write, you don't have to give up your identity to be a part of mine. You don't have to believe what everyone else believes about me. Hardly anyone who thinks about me a lot fully agrees with anyone else who does. I love that you capture that here from Bitcoin's first person point of view, because I think at the end of the day, this whole Bitcoin is a community of Bitcoiners. We don't agree on anything but Bitcoin, really, or what Bitcoin, or even what we don't necessarily even agree on that, because we probably disagree on what Bitcoin is,
Mm.
or
Which
because
is
I don't
not,
like the
and I
what?
point out that helps it survive all the more because we're not all playing the same strategy, right?
Well, that's so I want to read that.
Yeah.
My survival ability is in fact made greater the more that people disagree about things about what it takes for Bitcoin to survive. If some people think doing thing A will guarantee my survival, and others think that doing thing B will. The first group will do thing A, and the second group will do thing B. And that way I survive regardless of which of them was right. And that is very different from the way, it happens at a company. Because I mean, I see it all the time.
Companies keep going under for that reason.
Yeah, I mean,
Leader makes
leadership
the wrong
is
choice. This has no
18,
leader.
yeah, 18 levels away from what's happening
Yeah.
in the field. And information cascades, and you got the telephone game, and bad choices are made, and it takes months and years, and even usually that outlasts people's time at companies. And
But just even imagine there was some debate at Google and some of the engineers said, well, we think it should search this way, and some said it should search that way. Well, it's only going to search one way, right? Like, and the people who don't like it get the choice to leave the company. They don't get to take Google with them, right? But in Bitcoin, you literally can, you say, well, we're forking the code, right? Like I'm creating Bitcoin Cash and you guys are creating Bitcoin. And one of these things survives and the other one ends up being worth 200 122 bucks. Like that's the beauty of it, right? And we don't have to have a battle to see which one of us is going to win to and be the only one to try their approach. Everyone gets to try their approach. The the best man win. May both win, right? We may someday end up with two survivors. I don't think that's going to be the case, right? I think all these other shit coins are trending to zero. They're all dying. There's only room for one of these. There's only need for one of these things. And it's a natural monopoly because it allows itself, again, this great irony, because it allows itself to be broken into as many pieces as possible. We end up with one dominant winner at the end of the day. All of these paradoxes inside of Bitcoin are just beautiful when you understand how they work. And and Bitcoin allowing you to break it off and fork it at any block at any point in time is what actually leads to to everything else going to zero, and nobody ever being able to lose everything other than by making the choice to go exclusively on the wrong fork. You know, if Bitcoin forks and you sell all your one side of the fork and go to the wrong side, then you end up impoverished. But if it forks and one side dies and you did nothing, you still end up with as many Bitcoin as you had on the surviving chain. So you don't even have to give a shit about if there's another war to dispute and fork Bitcoin. You don't have, you are on the winning side no matter what. Wow. Suddenly I
It's
don't have to
very
go to war.
interesting when you think about this notion of team A does what they want, team B does what they want, and
Yeah.
this entity survives either way because of
Yeah.
those efforts. I can't think of anything else like that in
No.
this world.
No.
That's a paradox. You go on to write, there's probably a live group call on the internet right now where people are talking about me, trying to share that knowledge to test ideas and develop new ones in their effort to understand me, which, when viewed from my perspective, is also my own effort to understand me. So I think there is probably a call on the internet right now, or several,
There is.
in spaces, and I can't wrap my head around, Bitcoin trying to understand itself. That's an interesting notion. But then you're right. I'm really an enigma, but I'm real. Or I should say, Bitcoin goes on to say, I'm really an enigma, but I'm
Yeah.
real. And you can verify my existence. You don't have to have faith to believe in me. And those two words, faith and belief. So I want to ask you, that's my final question before I hope you read the final piece that I'm going to request. Faith and belief. So, let's say you run into someone, you haven't seen them in 2, 3 years. Hey, Tomer, you still believe in that Bitcoin thing?
Yeah.
And I'm getting out of here, like, I don't, not the Bitcoin, that word belief. Like, how do you explain that? Not what
Such a
Bitcoin
big
is,
word.
but that it's not a belief.
Well, yeah.
It's engineering, it's physics,
Yeah.
it's science, it's
Well,
math.
look, some of these words, the problem with some of these words is that they have two or three close meanings. And what people often do, because they don't want to confront the real question, is they alter the meaning, right? So believe, like, do you believe it exists? When
Right.
someone says, do you still believe in Bitcoin? They actually mean, do you still think it's going to succeed as money in the end, right? They don't mean, do you believe that your node is adding blocks, right? Um, and this is a really legitimate thing. Like, Bitcoin is real. You don't have to have faith to think that it's real. That's what I like. It really is running on all these nodes, and all these nodes definitely agree on what the hash of the latest block was, and of every single block that precedes was, and that means it's deterministic what each of the transactions in all of them were, and all of the stuff is all perfectly packed together, bit for bit identical everywhere in the world, and so is the difficulty and all of these things about the system. It's real, and it's really tied to physics, and nobody can fuck with it. Does that mean it's going to become all the money in the world? Well, that's a belief, right? That's the different form
Mm.
of belief, right? Like, you better believe that Bitcoin's real. You don't have to believe, and none of us are 100% certain that it's going to become all the money in the world or become worth $63,255. Like, right? But that those are two different terms of applications of the word belief. And the reason why you might believe that it's real is something that leads you, right? Why you can be certain that it's real is what leads you to ultimately having a belief that it's going to be very, very valuable. And I think that's, I try to cite that, in one point in this essay where it's like, it's taking time for my monetary units to catch on, but it's the best and most honest money in the world has ever seen. So I think it's going to catch on. And I think that's ultimately the logic, right? Like, you can listen to every one of Michael Saylor's brilliant arguments and analogies and everything else, but at the end of the day, it's like, this is better than anything that came before it by a long shot. So it ought to catch on sooner or later.
Yeah. And then you have assholes like Jamie Dimon who go on
Yeah,
national TV and play games like, is Satoshi going to
we
pop
need
up?
them.
And you're going
Yeah.
to have 42 million Bitcoin, and he's going to be like, ha ha, I have 22 million of them. And I think that's where really people get really lost in these words. Or you made great points there in delineating
Mhm.
what's happening and what people are really thinking. But yeah, things get confounded. And Well, I loved your answer. I would love for you to read Rich or Poor, Bitcoiners Have What Money Can't Buy. This goes back to 2021. Um,
Right.
when I look back at these 3 years, I'm really happy with where Bitcoin is, the journey
Yeah.
it's been on, up, down. In a lot of ways, it's been very stable
Mm-hmm.
with everything going on, and it's doing what it's supposed to.
Mm-hmm.
And I think in that regard, Bitcoin has already won. We've met, we know each other. We're
Yeah.
all going to be getting together in Miami in a few weeks. The world is a different place. We're in the age of Bitcoin. So I'd love for you to read that piece to roll out.
Sure. Okay. It's funny that you asked for this one because I'm writing about some of these themes again. So I'll share with you the article that if I finish it, that is involving these things again. But okay, rich or poor, Bitcoiners have what money can't buy. The things money can't buy. Let's talk about the things that money cannot buy. Money can't buy honesty. In fact, people who are trying to persuade you to give them your money are often not being entirely truthful with you. Money can't buy friendship. You can't walk into a store or a bar and buy a friend, someone who shares your values, who respects you, who you respect. And for the same reasons, it can't buy you love, which is an especially deep form of friendship. Most of all, money can't buy you things that are within yourself. It can't buy you self-esteem, intelligence, courage, or integrity, to list a few. Give an insecure person a pile of money and they will squander it either in showing off to others or in self-destructive pursuits. Give money to an intellectually lazy person and they will not become any smarter. Give a coward money and he will only have one more thing to be afraid of, losing that money. And give a cheater money and he will try to use it to hatch some dishonest scheme by which to get more. The things money can buy. Money will buy you a nice outfit, a great haircut, a fancy car, and a beautiful house, but happiness itself will remain out of reach without genuine friends and lovers who you can trust, and without being able to love and respect yourself. Money does not, in fact, buy happiness, not on its own. It's not sufficient. Why do we work so hard for money then? Why do some people measure their worth in dollars? It is true that we do need many of the things money can buy, like food, shelter, clothing, and even entertainment that makes us a little happier. Money can be an enabler. It can be used to purchase things that satisfy basic survival needs and thereby afford us the time to pursue these other values which money itself cannot buy. However, it is still very mistaken to measure our worth using any single number, let alone a number that we know omits friendship, love, self-esteem, intelligence, courage, integrity, and many other virtues and values we should exhibit and pursue. What's this got to do with Bitcoin? Now let us take a minute to look at the community of Bitcoiners. Bitcoiners believe in a new form of money, Bitcoin. We go to great lengths to explain why we believe it is the best form of money that has ever existed and is ever likely to exist. To be able to do that explaining, we must first go to great lengths to understand what money is and how Bitcoin meets the requirements of being money. To do that, we have to take a very honest look at history and at the present. We must explore what many people take for granted. We must ask hard questions and look for honest, defensible answers. We must learn about the math, which Bitcoin relies upon. We need to learn about energy production, which Bitcoin relies upon. We learn about economics, which is the study of how people interact with those things that money can buy. We develop deep conviction informed by all this learning and from our observations and reasoning about what is happening around us. We form views about where the world is headed. We conclude that a world with Bitcoin as its money, or even just as the money used by those who choose Bitcoin, is a better world. We conclude it is a better world because it is honest and transparent. It is a world without secrets, schemes, and deceptions about what money is. It is a world without powerful people who exercise control of the system of money to control the weak. We then find a moral mission in Bitcoin. We take on the responsibility of spreading the knowledge. It requires courage to do this. We must put our money where our mouth is by buying Bitcoin with our dollars. This is an act of risk-taking or courage. It is an act of integrity, aligning our words with our actions. We must remain steadfast. We are laughed at. Powerful people and institutions mock us and try to discredit us. They label us as enablers of criminals and terrorists. We either fortify our courage and conviction or leave Bitcoin. Those of us who stay know that our fellow Bitcoiners, who have been or are going through the same tribulations as we did are honest, intelligent, and courageous. We respect each other. We become friends. We each contribute what we can, how we can. We build the world we envision. We do all this unwaveringly while millions stand on the sidelines, some watching with curiosity, some mocking us, and some actively attacking and trying to stop us. Occasionally, one runs over and says, "I want to be like you," and we welcome them with open arms. Becoming a Bitcoiner is a process through which you obtain things money cannot buy. Take a look. Money can't buy honesty. It can't buy friendship. It can't buy self-esteem, courage, intelligence, or integrity either. Yet Bitcoiners, with their ideas, their ideals, efforts, and their achievements, have acquired all these things. Bitcoiners are honest. They have authentic friendships. They believe in themselves. They are brave. They are smart. And they possess an integrity that puts all of these things ahead of any wealth measured in a monetary value. No Bitcoiner judges another on the basis of how much Bitcoin that other person is worth. It's a faux pas in the community to even inquire about that. I love my fellow Bitcoiners. They are the best people on earth. Some may be financially rich, some not, but they are all worth much more than money to me. Bitcoin has given us all an abundance of the things that money cannot buy.
Bitcoin, Bitcoiners, truth, beauty, and love. Hello. We
Yeah.
are Bitcoin.
Yeah.
You, me, everyone. Thank
There
you
we-
so much, Tomer.
Hey, my pleasure. Thanks for having me on again. Look forward to seeing you soon.
Definitely, my friend.
Cheers.
Thank you so
Bye-bye.
much. Yo, thank you for listening. Please make sure that you're subscribed to the Bitcoin Matrix podcast so you don't miss out on any fresh and new content. I want to thank Tomer Strolight for coming on the show. I also want to thank our sponsors, River, the Bitcoin Conference, and CoinKite for powering the show. Keep learning, keep stacking, stay humble, and stay laser focused out there. This is Cedric. Peace.